Hello, my name is Bernie Kendall. I am the owner and operator of the Whitewater Canoe Company of Greeley, Colorado. We specialize in river canoe trips, and many of our trips we use this historic replica canoe on the Colorado, the Gunnison, the Green, and the Dolores rivers. Alright, we can be contacted on my phone number 970-381-5091 or 970-330-7124 or our website whitewatercanoeco.com. This is a historic replica of a Voyageur North canoe. It's 26 feet long and it holds 4,000 pounds. These were primarily used in the fur trade in the far north, going west from Grand Portage. The Voyageurs were the main characters that paddled these boats, and they were the toughest of the tough at the time. But this was the canoe of choice for the backcountry because of its size and its carrying capacity. Of course, the boats were all made out of birch bark and from found materials. As you can look on here, you can see the number of pieces of bark that would have been used. Pine pitch to hold seams together, stitched with spruce root. This historic replica has been used for lots of different kinds of historic events, school outings, and university classes. But they're classic canoes, and they were used for over 200 years in the fur trade. Now, when they paddled with the boats like this, each boat had about 6 paddlers, sometimes only 5, but the boats had a carrying capacity of 4,000 pounds, including the paddler's weights. So each person that was in the boat was responsible for a certain amount of weight in the boat. In the middle of the boat, you'll notice we've got these packs here. Packs are called pieces. Each piece weighs 90 pounds. When we were going out to trade for the beaver crew into the backcountry, the Voyageurs took the packs with the trade goods in them. When they got out to the backcountry, they used the trade goods to trade with the native people for the beaver crews. And they did some trapping themselves. At the end of the season, they wintered over in the backcountry, and after the spring thaw, they would paddle back to Grand Portage with the beaver crews, and they would exchange them for trade goods that came up from Montreal in a larger canoe than this, which was 36 feet long. So the history of the Voyageur is a pretty long history, and the people who paddled them were quite an interesting bunch of people. They didn't have very long lives. They worked hard, but they would consider themselves to be the best of the best and the toughest of the toughest people of the time. If I were going to hire you as a Voyageur paddler, you'd have to be less than 5'6" tall, and you'd short, stocky build. Didn't want anybody in the boat that's going to take up room that we could use for trade goods or for beaver crews. So we limited the size of the people in the boats. When we went into backcountry, there would be a brigade of these canoes, 5 to 10 canoes in a brigade, and the brigade would travel to a designated place into the backcountry. They had established canoe routes, and they gauged their day's paddles by how far they could go, and they measured it in pipes. I always thought that was interesting. After so many hours of paddling, they would stop and smoke a small pipe. So if the lake was 3 pipes long, that meant it'd take a lot of hours to get across that lake. Well, they had an interesting way of keeping these guys engaged though when they were paddling the boats. They sang a lot, French paddling songs, kept the rhythm up, kept the spirits up, kind of diverted their attention away from the mundane business of paddling the canoes. Now, if you were going to go as a Voyageur on one of the trips, it would allow you only 40 pounds of your own personal gear. And I would give you, at the start of the trip, a pair of trousers and a shirt. Everything else you would provide yourself, including the paddle. You'd have to make your own paddle. And when we would get going, once you wore out your shirt and pants, you'd have to make some new ones. So it was a very interesting lifestyle. A day's paddle on the canoe would be up to 15 hours. Now the food was great though. Get up early in the morning and we would paddle for several hours before breakfast. And the breakfast would consist of split pea soup, maybe a piece of pemmican, or maybe a little bit of jerky, depending on where you were at exactly, and some bannock bread. And that gave you all the essentials you needed for proteins and for carbohydrates to keep these men going hour after hour. So when they got to the end of the day, the boats were very fragile, made out of birch bark. They would unload the boats in shallow water, wade to the shore, pick the boats up, take them to the shore, and they would have daily patching to do on the canoes where they got small dings in the birch bark. So they would pitch all the holes in the canoes, turn the boat upside down, let it dry good, throw a tarp over the top of it, and sleep underneath the tarp. And then the next day start all over again. Long, long days until they got to the place they would winter over. Interesting lifestyle though. Now the guys that were in the backcountry that paddled these boats, called the real voyageurs, the other paddlers who came up from Montreal in the larger canoes, they were called the pork eaters. And they called them pork eaters because they got to go back to Montreal and eat pork in the wintertime. Spend the winters inside a nice warm spot. Unlike the voyageurs who, once they got to the backcountry, they had to either go to an established camp or make cabins for the winter. So this lifestyle lasted as long as the beaver industry did. When the women in Europe changed their minds and decided that they were going to use silk instead of the beaver, it kind of killed the industry. So went the way of the voyageur, and they kind of faded from history. Now one of the common staples of the voyageur was the bannock bread. It's an unleavened bread, not too much different than other unleavened breads you may have tasted. It consisted of a couple cups of flour, a couple of teaspoons full of baking powder, maybe a bit of salt, and if you really have a sweet tooth you could add some sugar, which they often didn't. Made that into a loaf that was flat, about an inch or so thick, into a round dough ball, this big around, put it inside of a steel skillet, and it's cooked with reflective heat off the fire. When the side turns brown, you turn it over and cook the other side. Makes a nice bread. It's easy to cook. It's also easy to pack and store. And it's pretty nutritious, I think, especially if you happen to find some wild honey to put on it. Again, my name is Bernie Kindle from the Whitewater Cruise Company. That's our bannock bread, and I suggest you all try that at home. Get a batch of them made up and then take it on the trail with you. You'll enjoy it. Have a nice day.
The Wild Things Show and Hunter's Choices is with Vic Nell. Enjoy.